Okay, welcome back to Hindustan Astrology. I'm Katya, and today we have back Dr. Santhip Kanholy. Thank you so much for joining me again. And in today's
Namaste.
video, yes, I'm so excited you're here. We've had a little bit of electricity problems, so it's, very good. I'm very happy.
Sure.
So in today's video, we're going to talk about Mars Graha through the Nakshatras. And just to remind people, we are using the Vimshotri Dasha cycle system, and the different Dasha cycle systems have different planets associated with them. So this doesn't necessarily apply to the other Dasha systems. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure, Katya. So, one thing perhaps it'll be a good thing to remind the audiences actually is that here when I say Mars to the nakshatra, so far in the series I've been describing about the nakshatras falling in Mars ruled signs and as well as the Mars ruling nakshatras as well. But what is conventionally used is the Vimshotri Dasha lordship of Mars, so that's a very important thing to recognize. Remember, there are all kinds of dashas out there. There is Manduki Dasha, there is Rashi Dasha, there's 100 other Dasha systems out there, even the Ashtotri Dasha. Now, remember, in Ashtotri Dasha, or even Yogini Dasha, the same nakshatras which you're talking are going to have different planetary rulers as well. In Vimshotri Dasha, we look at Mars ruling nakshatras today, but know that in Ashtotri Dasha, the same nakshatras would be ruled by other planets. So then because of this, there are many astrologers out there who think it's not, we shouldn't associate the planets with the nakshatras also. That is also true. Within this perspective, it is true. Because remember, we are using the Vimshotri Dasha to actually associate that planetary lordship with the nakshatras at the first place. So purely in the original formulation, you could say nakshatras only had the association with its deities. So that's a very, very important thing. But once you really begin to understand the deity itself, you begin to see how even certain dasha systems, when you view time in one particular way, why even planetary lordships were ascribed to those particular nakshatras as well. So that's also a good tip about Vimshotri Dasha. So it's one of those things, So definitely there is value as long as you feel comfortable using the Vimshotri Dasha. That energy of Vimshotri Dasha is present for you, and you can use that Vimshotri Dasha to use a planetary lordship association with nakshatras also, and that's fine. I do think there is value in it. I don't think it's not valueless, but there's definitely recognize that the original Vedas, there is no, the original astronomical text, you're not going to find, this nakshatra is ruled by this Mars and so forth. They describe Vimshotri Dasha, rulership of this particular nakshatra is this particular planet. So that's a very subtle kind of thing to be reminded of. It's one of those fundamentals of nakshatra that everyone needs to be familiar with. And of course, for this series, I've been using Vimshotri Dasha lordships, for all the planets.
Yes, and Krishnamurti is the one that really popularized this, the KP system and the lordships. And what I found this is great for is when you're doing transit work for your clients or yourself, of course, or if you're in mundane astrology and you're looking at world events, you need to look at every single dispositor coming off of every single major aspect because it's algebra and you're just breaking it down to the final dispositor. So it's like the least common denominator, right? And because this is the holographic universe, this is the unseen world that can be seen through these planetary lordships. So I think that, for instance, I'm studying with Simon right now, and he really focuses on the deity stories. And if you don't understand the stories, then that's the number one thing. You have to understand the deities. And then you look at, okay, so, Saturn's in Capricorn right now. Capricorn's ruled by Saturn. So boom, that makes it even more powerful because it disposits to itself, right? So just look, it helps you gauge the strength of a chart and the positions in a chart. So I just want to make that clear. Because the traditional way to view nakshatras is through the deity. And so that really is the number one thing. But we're just taking it a step further because, it's become very popular to talk about this. And when I work with charts, it's essential for me to look at the Lord of the nakshatra to see where it falls, and then where that falls, and it unravels a whole new set of information. So I just wanted to make that clear before we started.
Yeah, that's a good thing. The KP thing, in the KP system, they use the lordship, the sequence of planets in a very fundamental way. That's the fundamental essence around which the KP system revolves. You divide even the nakshatra into the Vimshottari Dasha planetary periods into the same proportion used again and again and again. The sublord, the sub-sublord, and so forth. Of course, it has its own value. It's a way of looking at things. It's one more view within the holographic universe. That's a simple way to look at it.
And it's not
But
that
then,
those things didn't exist before. They existed way back when, but their focus wasn't on that. Their focus was on the story of the deity.
yeah. The key thing is that with, you can use the lordships. There is no harm in using it. I won't say you shouldn't use the lordships also. But recognize that the original thing, you are not going to find the lordship described in the Vedas, whereas you'll find nakshatra deities described in the Vedas. But what is great is that if you understand the story, then you can even understand why this particular planet is actually lording one particular nakshatra as well. That's the other way also. Yeah, exactly. When you use the Vimshottari Dasha, remember Vimshottari Dasha is also one more way of looking at timing events. Remember, dashas are always used for timing events.
Yes,
so when you
and
use
in
that
mundane
particular,
astrology, it's all about timing events and trying to figure out why something happened. So that's
exactly.
why this works so well.
It does has its own use for sure. But there are people, like I said, you can use other dasha systems with other planetary lordships and give similar kind of predictions as well. But recognize that you can even get rid of all the planets, and then you can still use the stories of the nakshatras to predict events as well. That is also possible. Just that in this day and age is requiring a lot of work. So not many people are doing it, but that's possible. Definitely, I can say that as well. But that's good. That's good that because I wanted to make that clear. So because the nakshatra lordships are that's good that we also talked about that. Because the nakshatra lordships are usually based on Vimshottari Dasha. It's a subtle point that you don't understand until you really get deep into it. That's the way I would say it.
One thing I want to add is that when people say, "Oh, but it wasn't mentioned in the Vedas," well, okay. The Vedas were an oral tradition. Not everything's been written down. You have to remember, just because you have these books full of text that, it doesn't say it here. Well, guess what, guys? We weren't alive back then. We weren't alive 50,000 years ago or whatever. And so a lot of things get lost, they do. And so that's why if something works, I add it.
Yeah, definitely. 100%, because we do believe that the Vedas are very pure, but then the way we believe Vedas are also different. Perhaps you could be living a Vedic concept right now. You may never know. The moment you connect with the wind and rain and so forth, immediately the gods are activated. But if you don't, then you're saying, okay, I'm not in the Vedas. That's a different thing also. So it's a matter of consciousness, really. Astrology, when you begin to approach it as a science of consciousness, then the potential is enormous. You can use it in different ways. I don't think we need to restrict ourselves to certain ideas. To be frank, when you're using astrology, you can be open about using ideas anyways. It's a very important thing. I think the Vimshottari Dasha lordships is useful. There are people who give fantastic prediction based on that. Then there are people who don't use Vimshottari Dasha at all and give fantastic prediction based on that as well. So then makes you question, okay, what is the real thing? So the final answer is use what comes naturally to you. As simple as that. And then you will see your own consciousness developing, your own thing is developing, and so forth. And then the people who are actually using the pure nakshatra deities, they will be purifying themselves in many ways through their clients and through the prediction and so forth. People are using Vimshottari Dasha, they are also purifying their own consciousness in that particular way. It's a very important perspective to hold. Definitely. Okay. Yeah, but recognize that, when I'm discussing all the Mars, Nakshatra, and so forth, I'm using the Vimshottari Dasha lordships here. Very, very important.
Okay. All right.
Great.
So are we ready to go?
Yeah, let's see. I'll just share my screen.
Mm-hmm.
but it's an important thing to recognize. As a student of nakshatras, that was one of the first things which my nakshatra teacher, Dr. Arjun Pai, actually taught us. But then this concept of why it's important to look at the deities, why it's important to understand the Vimshuti Dasha lordships and so forth. That is very, very important thing to recognize, because then you begin to see that the power of the deity itself, the power of the Vedic deity in actually getting fantastic results. And it's one of those things that we don't, you could say in this day and age, we have lost the art of actually connecting with the energy of the deity, the pure Vedic deities. Okay,
Yes.
great. So here we'll actually try to understand Mars as a planet through the nakshatras connected with it. Again, the red colored nakshatras here are the nakshatras ruled by Mars. So here when I say the nakshatras ruled by Mars, it comes down to like the Vimshuti Dasha lordship of these nakshatras is Mars. That's a very important thing. Now remember again, you can use Ashtotiri Dasha, you can use Yogini Dasha, you can use Chara Dasha, you can use all kinds of dashas out there. They might have different planetary lordships, and the dashas are used for timing events. But the actual energy of the nakshatra is actually defined by the deity. But it's even if it be so, the timing events part association with certain planets is also pointing to that planet actually carrying that particular energy within that particular dasha system framework as well. That's also very important. Okay, great. So let's look at Mars now. The Mars nakshatras, right? So first of all, the Mars ruled nakshatras are the Mrigashira nakshatra falling across Taurus and Gemini. You have Chitra nakshatra falling across Virgo and Libra. And then you have Dhanishta nakshatra falling across Capricorn and Aquarius. So what is interesting about Mars nakshatras is that Mars nakshatras are the only group of nakshatras in which the padas are equally distributed in the signs. In both the signs, you find two padas in one sign in Taurus sign, two padas in Gemini sign, or also for Mrigashira. Same is the case with Chitra, as far as the padas are concerned, being distributed amongst Virgo and Libra sign. The Dhanishta two padas are falling in Capricorn, and the rest of the two padas are falling in Aquarius. So it's a very interesting kind of a nakshatra. Mars forces us to come down to balance. Mars is a real planner that we have to get ourselves in control, especially the anger within us. Especially the the actions within us, they need to be balanced. So that nakshatra distribution itself is pointing to a lot of interesting secret about Mars there. That's one thing that's very, very interesting. Now the other aspect which I'm trying to present here is that looking at the nakshatras falling in Mars ruled signs. So you have Mars is ruling the signs of Aries and Scorpio, in which the nakshatras falling in those signs are Ashwini, Bharani, and Kritika Pada 1. You have Vishaka Pada 4, Anuradha, and Jyeshta falling in Scorpio as well. So these nakshatras are also very, very carrying an energetic signature of Mars as well. That's also one more thing to recognize. In fact, there are astrologers who use the conjunctions of the planetary lordships of the nakshatra lord and the Rashi lord to give nakshatra based predictions. So for instance, Mars and Ketu conjunction, if that is present in your chart, because Ketu is the lord of Ashwini and Mars is the ruler of Aries, Mars and Ketu conjunction can actually act as Ashwini nakshatra energy. And there are people who do that, and you can give prediction based on that as well. So that's why this kind of concepts this simple concept of looking at Mars nakshatras falling in Mars sign is very, very important as well. But what is interesting here is that you can see that Ashwini, Bharani, and Kritika are already having a Martian characteristic there. You can almost see immediately how Ashwini, the horses, which is the warrior, the mount of the warriors, for instance. Bharani is like the law, the ruled by the Yama, who is the actual keeper of law. The birth and death is actually ruled by Yama in many occasions. You have Kritika, which is actually a sword, a scissor, so that's also symbolic of the warrior's weapons. Now, if you look at Vishaka is actually ruled by Indra and Agni. So Indra, Agni, so you find the themes of the king, the royalty kind of themes happening here. Anuradha is actually the best friend. Now Mars natives can really be the closest friends you might have. The Mars would be the best friend with whom you can discuss your hobbies and so forth, your interests and so forth. Mars is the teammates in many ways. The people you work with, the fellow soldier you have, so that you can actually win the war. That is the Martian team. And then you have Jyeshta, which is purely ruled by Indra. Now, Indra is actually the pointing to the lot of gifts that Indra carries. Indra actually carries, Indra is the king of gods. Now, you can imagine if gods carried a lot of things, a lot of siddhis and so forth. Indra is actually the master of them all. He's the king of them all. So there's definitely a lot of wealth of wisdom here with Jyeshta as well. But many times but remember, there are a lot of stories of the gods in which, Indra would fall down and then he would come up, he would do a lot of spiritual practices to come back up and so forth. So in many times, Mars is also a natural planet that is very easily, where we can easily fall down to our impulses. And that's also a very key thing. Now, Mars is also an extremely sexual planet. You can see that with Mars ruling the 8th house of this zodiac, which is Scorpio also. And all these nakshatras are having extremely sexual, energy is very much strong there also. Now, of course, the other Mars-ruled nakshatras will also have an energy of passion, a strong energy of courage, valor, that these energies will be very much present also. Now, a very important aspect in understanding Mars to nakshatras is identifying the nakshatra where it's getting exalted, having its Mul Trikon, and where it's getting debilitated as well. You begin to understand that planet very much when you understand these nakshatras very, very strongly. So, for instance, Mars is actually getting debilitated in the nakshatra of Ashlesha. Now, remember the deity of Ashlesha, which is Nagas. So, Nagas, you look at a snake, the one thing you know about a snake is that it's not always going to be straight. It can coil up, it can crawl on the ground. It's always going in a wavy fashion. Exactly that, So it's very important to recognize that, now Mars is getting debilitated here because Mars cannot be straightforward here in this nakshatra. This nakshatra, the deity itself is carrying the energy of, movement and so forth, and Mars is not feeling stable there. And that's a big problem there, So that's why Mars is considered to be debilitated in Ashlesha. It's a very pure way how you can see it. Now, Mars is actually getting exalted in Dhanishta. Now, what is the symbol of Dhanishta? Symbol of Dhanishta is the drum. An army marches to the drum beat. There is an army band. When a band is happening, the drum beat is what is happening. And then, a drum and a flute, right? So the flute is the marching, the leader is actually having the flute, and there's an entire army marching behind it. You can see that there is a rhythm that the army marches to. And that's a natural thing for a soldier to do. Give them a rhythm, they can do it very easily. That's much more easier for them to handle that kind of a deal. So Mars is very, very happy here. Mars is exalted here. Martian energies can express itself very, very purely here. That is the key thing to recognize here. Now you find that Mars is having his Mula Trikon in Ashwini Nakshatra. So Ashwini Nakshatra is actually a nakshatra which is that of beginning new things. The deity here is Ashwin Kumars. Ashwin Kumars were miracle healers. It's these were the deities who were first arrive at any particular scene or any particular yajnas or havans or rituals. You would always invoke the Ashwin Kumars first. Because that means that Mars is someone who wants to become first in everything they do. They are extremely competitive. The competitive nature of Mars is very strong here. But you can see that competitive nature of Mars purely from the Ashwini Nakshatra teams also. Many times they begin something new. Many times they are also great at, and Ashwin Kumar, the horse-headed gods, right? They love their vehicles. Mars is actually a karka for vehicles, You can see that with Ashwini also. This theme of travel is also seen. So soldiers is something you want, someone who you want to like travel person, make it safe for you so that the things can work out for you eventually. So it's one of those things to understand how Martian energy is actually playing out through these nakshatras also, especially the nakshatras what is getting debilitated, what is getting exalted, and what is having its Mul Trikon degrees as well. Now, when you look at Mars, you will begin to see these three nakshatras influencing whatever Mars is doing in your chart. You'll begin to see that. It's one of those subtle things you'll begin to observe eventually over a period of time. Of course, when you look at Mars, Mrigashira, Chitra, and Dhanishta, you'll begin to see that that's always the case, because it's the lord of these nakshatras. But then these three nakshatras are also should be a very important part of your analysis as well. You'll begin to see a lot more things coming up. Now we'll begin to actually understand the Martian nakshatras a little bit more through martial arts. So of course the arts of the warrior is basically martial arts. All soldiers have to study martial arts. That's the determining thing. No matter what culture, what country, You had to study martial arts if you had to be a warrior. And it's called martial arts. It's the Martian
There we
art.
go.
Exactly that. So so you can see, of course, here we are going to explore Mars through martial arts very in a subtle manner. Now, here you can see martial arts has been practiced as the form of wrestling throughout ages. You find the Greek thing, the Turkish painting here, if I'm Byzantine painting here, there's a Greek ceramic thing, a pottery carrying the wrestling as a team. Wrestling is still an active sport right now. And now here you have Bruce Lee with his Ip Man, his teacher, his Wing Chun teacher. You find, and China has its own history of martial art, which we'll definitely look into. And then there is this is a modern day fighting art of Krav Maga, which is actually taught which was developed by Israelis, if I'm not mistaken, the Israeli army personnel. They developed that, and now it's like a fighting art. It's supposed to be very efficient combat art. Suppose most efficient combat art where there's no extraneous punches and so forth. That's one thing there. But martial arts is a complete different, pure expression of Martian energy, as you can find. There's no doubt about that. Now, of course, in India, India has its own traditions of martial arts as well. For instance, the state where I'm from, Kerala, is very famous for its martial art form of Kalaripayattu. Kalaripayattu is actually, you'll
What is it
find
called?
Kalaripayattu.
Got it.
Kalaripayattu. In fact, it is very much integrated with Ayurveda. In fact, the masters of Kalaripayattu are actually considered masters of healing as well. Because they were constantly treating warriors, so they knew how they could heal their warriors very strongly. So they had a strong system of Ayurveda thing going on. They also had a strong system of spirituality embedded in that also. There was usually they are worshipping a weapon carrying goddess here. There would be a Kalaripayattu, the dojo in Kalaripayattu would be having a shrine for a goddess. Usually it was like someone like goddess Durga or goddess Kali who's carrying a weapon like sword and stuff. So here you find two warriors actually, engaging in combat display here. But Kalaripayattu, you usually have a shield and a sword, and of course it isn't very much like a teacher-student relationship is very much involved there and so forth. Now, interestingly, you do find a lot of other weapons across India. For instance, this is a weapon this is a kind of knife used in Kalaripayattu. Now, here you see, and these are all weapons used across India, like ancient weapons of India. Now, this is an interesting weapon called as the chakra, which is basically a wheel, a disc. You use this disc as a weapon. You would pick this disc out of this hat and you would just throw it up. This is what the ancient Sikh warriors would do. They would wear a hat. They would be wearing this hat, and they would be having this disc on top of the hat, and they would actually pull out this disc and keep on throwing them. It's a very interesting. It's a wheel, and that's perhaps this was also inspired by the Sudarshan Chakra, which Vishnu is actually carrying. He's actually carrying Sudarshan Chakra, the wheel, the weapon that is supposed to go and destroy his enemies, and that is a guaranteed destruction. There are still people who worship the Sudarshan weapon. There are mantras to activate the Sudarshan Chakra in your life and so forth. There are many things like that. So the chakra is actually a weapon which the Sikh warriors would carry. So it's an interesting thing. You can see that here the key thing is that you can definitely see someone with a strong Mars. They are going to carry weapons. They are going to be strong about gun rights and all that. They want their weapons in their home. They will be good. Very likely that they might be having a sword in their home. They might be having some kind of knife.
I would say also
exactly. Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So if there is a Martian influence very much present in the chart, good chance that it might play out through weapons as well. They're the key thing here. And of course, in martial arts, you do find weapons. That's a very important thing. You train with weapons. That's the art.
I have a question about this slide real fast. Because Kritika is the sword, right?
Right.
What nakshatra would be the shield? Would it be within Kritika as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you look at Kritika, the opposite nakshatra of that is actually Vishaka. I begin to so if sword is the one thing, then the opposite of that is what is actually preventing that. So you can think of that. So Vishaka nakshatra
is Libra opposition.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly that. So Vishaka nakshatra is something I would think as a shield. The concept of shield. Because what I've seen that people with Vishaka nakshatra, they likely have some kind of family shield thing going on.
Ah.
You'll
crest
see
of
that.
arms.
So, yeah, the crest of arms, different family shields in the in the English in England, in England and stuff, Wales and stuff, they have their own, shield, family shield that has been maintained for a really long, and it's a big traditional thing for them. It's an important aspect of their honor and so forth. And there are families who worship the shield, families who maintain the shield. It's just like how in India you have a family temple, they have a family shield that is maintained. So it's exactly that. So
Okay.
definitely, I do think the shield could be Vishaka. That's a good question. Definitely, that could be Vishaka.
Okay.
Let's see. Now here I wanted to introduce a very crazy weapon here. You can see this is actually called as a flexible sword or urmi. Now this entire thing is actually a sword. So he's actually exercising this sword around. Now in Kalaripaita, this level of sword is supposed to be the topmost weapon you could actually master. Only a master of Kalaripaita would be handling this sword. So you had to spend years of training before you could actually handle the sword, which is Urmi. And this was a very traditional kind of a thing, a very raw energy kind of thing going on. The sword could supposedly kill 100 people in one thing. That was the power of that sword and so forth, especially in the arms of a trained master. Now one simple question I can ask here is that what nakshatra does this weapon resemble?
Well, I'm sorry, what did you say?
What nakshatra does this weapon? What nakshatra could Urmi be representing?
Well, this would be Ashlesha.
Exactly, right? So you can see that. You can see that Ashlesha, the snake.
The snake. And
exactly.
have you heard of capoeira from Brazil?
Mm-hmm.
Capoeira is, it's the way that the slaves would pretend to practice, they're practicing their martial art, but they were disguising it as a dance.
Yes, exactly.
If they were caught practicing fighting, they would be, cracked down on. And so it's all about like working with the energy field of your opponent and learning how to duck away from it. And, it's very snaky.
Yeah, definitely. You're going to find that for sure. Definitely. That's very good. So you can see that here I wanted to mention that you can even classify weapons based on nakshatras if you have the eye for it. You'll begin to see certain kind of things becoming very, very prominent around certain kind of themes of certain planets. That's the key thing here. Now here we are just going to explore some Chinese martial arts. Of course, you talk about martial arts movies, there was a time and age when it meant that, you were watching a Chinese action movie, that's what it meant. Because that's how popular Chinese martial arts were. And China definitely had its own history of warriors and warring period and all that. And definitely they developed their own martial arts system for a long period of time. Because you have supposedly the Buddhist, it said that one of the Buddhist monks from India went down to China and taught the Kalaripaita system. That's what one of the historians believe. One group of historians believe that. The other here, though, you can see, I wanted to kind of show the Chinese martial arts. So this is actually a great master of the Chinese martial art form, Xingyi. We'll kind of look into this. And of course, even now in this day and age, you find Tai Chi being practiced by majority of the Asians. You find that in China, you go in the morning in the park, most of them are actually practicing Tai Chi. It's a slow kind of moving kind of art also. Now, here I wanted to actually kind of approach Mars through the lens of the Chinese internal martial arts. Now, of course, what is interesting about the internal martial arts is that you actually try to balance the 5 elements, the 5 Chinese elements within your body. So the fire, wood, water, metal, and earth. So and correspondingly, you can see that this is a fire punch which he's doing, this is a wood punch which he's doing, this is the water punch which he's doing, this is a metal punch he's doing, this is the earth punch he's doing. So it's kind of like you can see, and when you do so, when you work with these kind of punches, you are kind of activating the corresponding fire organs in your body, which is lungs, wood organs in your body, which is, spleen and so forth. Earth is different. I think metal is actually lungs, and fire is something else. I forget. Water is definitely kidneys. I know that for sure. So water is actually kidney, in which with this particular movement, you are actually massaging your internal organs. When you massage, when you improve your internal organs, your health naturally improves further. That's the key thing. So that was the whole concept behind Chinese internal martial arts. Of course, the further you develop these elements in your body, the further you improve your internal organs, you would develop the chi and all that. This was the legendary masters of chi who could, who just touch you and you'll be falling down. That's true. Right. So this was the prerequisite for even developing that kind of martial art. And definitely Chinese internal martial arts were very secretive and so forth, very powerful as well at the same time. At the same time, they also helped in improving your health tremendously as well. Of course, anyone who does feng shui, these elements will be very familiar with them. You're balancing these kind of elements in the feng shui of your home as well. Now, what is interesting is that we kind of look into Chinese martial arts, through three different internal martial arts. Now, there are three different internal martial arts, which is considered as the sister arts, the three main internal martial art forms. The oldest of them is actually Tai Chi. Tai Chi is actually considered as the oldest internal martial art form. That is something out there. Of course, if you know Tai Chi, and then, but that Tai Chi is going to be very slow and so forth. Tai Chi is actually, you move in slow kind of thing. You're taking these long stances and so forth. A lot of very slow, gentle movements.
Right.
So it turns out that Tai Chi was taking a lot of time to train warriors. So then, they actually wanted something quick to develop. So correspondingly, a general actually developed a martial art form called as Xing Yi Chuan. What is interesting about Xing Yi Chuan is that you can see he's having a forward stance. Both the arms are forward and so forth. And that's a very pure thing. Whereas in Tai Chi, you have one arm backward, the other arm is forward. So the general actually designed the martial art form in which there was only forward movement. That's a very important aspect. Very direct kind of a thing going on with Xing Yi Chuan. And then you have the other sister internal martial art form, which is the Bagua Chan. Now, as you can see, this old man is actually so nimble that he can actually walk on top of the, the basket. So in Bagua Chan, a fundamental thing about the Bagua Chan art was that you were actually going around the circle. That's a very important aspect here. The fundamental movement of Bagua Chan is that, even though the arms are forward, you're actually moving in a circle. In Xing Yi Chuan, there is no circular movements. In Bagua Chan, you have circular movements. In Tai Chi, there are all kinds of movements. Now we'll look into that. So let's look into Tai Chi. You can see in Tai Chi, they say that this posture on this black and white picture, this Tai Chi master holding this posture, carry the essence of Tai Chi. This single pose, you have one arm moving backward, the other arm lifted lightly. In fact, some masters call this as you are holding the maiden is holding the handkerchief with the back kind of thing. And this is the actual, the actual forward kind of movement also. You can see in Tai Chi, there are two different kind of movement. There is one arm that is direct, the other arm that is kind of flexible almost. So there is a balance kind of thing going on. And this is the perfect yin yang, and so forth. There's a lot of movements in Tai Chi. You can see you do it there are 100 postures before you get to the final kind of resting phase on yin yang and so forth. Of course, right now it's considered as a very good way to extend longevity and so forth. But in my opinion, if you start doing Tai Chi, no matter what age you are at, you are actually improving a lot of things. We'll talk about that. Remember, Tai Chi used to be a martial art form before they would actually train warriors, but just that it would take a long time for it to be trained, for a warrior to be trained in Tai Chi form, because it required the warrior to balance himself at all different levels. So that was the Tai Chi martial art form. Now, Xing Yi Chuan, on the other hand, is actually very famous for its explosive power and the very quick way to develop warriors. It was very easy to use this internal martial art form to develop warriors and power very, very quickly. So you can see that, there's a Xing Yi master just, exploding a punch and, the other person basically off the floor. So it carries a lot of power. Of course, the whole concept revolved around Qi cultivated in the Dantian, and then the body becomes harmonious and stable. And when the Qi erupts, the body produces power unmatched in most external systems. So you'll find that most of the masters of Xing Yi Chuan or Tai Chi, they are trying to develop the Qi in their Dantian, and then they release the Qi, through their body. At that point, it becomes a very powerful way to actually, very powerful way to fight. That's the key thing. That's a very important aspect in Xing Yi Chuan as well. But note that here this is the fundamental stance of Xing Yi Chuan, the same stance which the master was holding in previous pictures. Just that there is a variation with the arm going upwards. But you can see the stance is that it's forward stance. Both the arms are forward as well, in front side of the body and so forth. So it's a very interesting kind of thing going on, Xing Yi. Now, finally, in the Chinese martial art form of Bagua, which is the third sister art of the internal martial art, you find that the Bhagwa is actually going. The Bhagwa, the octagon of the Bhagwa is a very important aspect there. In Bhagwa. In fact, you can see the master, the big essence of Bhagwa, big part of Bhagwa was actually to move around the Bhagwa circle. So it's actually called as the Bhagwa circle. You go around the Bhagwa circle, you would walk around the circle, you would walk clockwise way, anti-clockwise way. Each time you would do with different poses. You would walk with this particular pose around the circle. You would walk with this particular pose around the circle. And Bhagwa is a completely different. It has its own deepest philosophical system within. The Chinese I Ching is basically derived from the Bhagwa circle. All these are also the I Ching. And you can
Feng
see
Shui too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Feng Shui.
Exactly. In Feng Shui too. So it's having its own deep philosophical kind of system going on. And very important thing with Bhagwa is that you can see as you walk the circle, your knees are kind of touching each other and so forth. Your knees, the flexibility of your knees are improved in a big way and so forth. That's the big thing going on here. You could see one leg is actually going straight, whereas the other leg is supposed to curl into it. That's a very fundamental thing about Bhagwa. The key thing about Bhagwa is that you're going in a circle. That is the key thing. And you find that again, Bhagwa is also very powerful. It had its own mystical kind of thing going on. It was very powerful in many ways. In fact, you wouldn't attack an enemy directly in Bhagwa. You would actually approach them sideways. That is the key essence of Bhagwa also. So in Xing Chuan, you would face the enemy straight on, but in Bhagwa, you would actually attack them sideways.
And that's very Cancerian. That's how the crab moves. He never goes straight forward. He kind of goes this way, this way, this way.
That's a good point. That's a good, keep that in mind, Katya. So because the next slide, I'm actually going.
Man.
Yeah, that's something I can always, that's a good thing to keep in mind. Because here now I'm going to ask you, now here remember I characterize Tai Chi as slow, a slow martial art form. I characterize Xingyi as an explosive martial art form. I characterize Bhagwa as a serpentine kind of martial art form. So my question here is that what nakshatras would you associate with each of these martial arts form?
Right. Well, very clearly, Ashlesha, serpentine, explosive.
Right.
Would be would that be Mrigashira?
Mrigashira is a good guess. Let's see. What about Tai Chi?
Tai Chi, well, slow. I mean, that would have to be Chitra.
Tai Chi would be Chitra. Well, let's see. Both are not bad answers, but here's the way I'm seeing it. Both are good, important. Those nakshatra aspects do have an important thing for sure. Of course, you have a lot of pictures here, so it's a very interesting thing. Perhaps there is a Chitra and Mrigashira in each of the martial arts as well. Now, the way here I wanted to highlight was that you can think of Tai Chi as being in Dhanishta. Dhanishta is actually falling in the Saturnian signs of Capricorn and Aquarius. Very slow, take time and so forth. You can see Tai Chi, but remember Mars is actually exalted here in Dhanishta. The most powerful warriors were actually the Tai Chi warriors because they were balanced in all levels. If you were trained in Tai Chi, you couldn't defeat them. Now, what about Xingyi? Xingyi is an explosive kind of nakshatra. The best nakshatra that in my opinion, is going to be Ashwini nakshatra. Here, what interesting
is that? Including the Mars Rashis. Yeah.
Exactly. In the Mars Rashi. Yeah, that's right. So what is interesting about Ashwini nakshatra also is that this particular stance is actually called as the host stance. So this was the host stance of which was a fundamental. This is a fundamental essence of Xingyi Chuan martial art. Which is a host stance. That's straight up Ashwini. And even you could say even like well, host stance is different martial arts, but that's fine. But what I would say is that the key thing is that with Ashwini nakshatra, it's that you can explode. There's an explosive kind of energy that is in Ashwini nakshatra. You are exploding. You are impulsive. You are too impatient. That's the exact Xingyi Chuan characteristic. The general was impatient, so he developed the Xingyi Chuan. That's what happened also. And of course, Bhagwa is definitely carrying this Ashlesha nakshatra energy, and definitely Bhagwa, Ashlesha nakshatra natives do carry a lot of secrets. They do carry a lot of mystical secrets. They're capable of attaining a lot of mystical realms and mystical powers as well. So, but remember, Ashlesha is this fundamental movement of the Bhagwa in which you are moving around a circle in a serpentine fashion, and even you are not attacking directly. So, what you said about Cancer, right? So here you can see it very clearly. Bhagwa is a pure Ashlesha Nakshatra in motion in a martial art form. Shingi Chuan is purely Ashwini Nakshatra in motion in a martial art form. Tai Chi is again a small, slow, gentle, rhythmic kind of movement. That is also the Dhanisha Nakshatra movement, in this martial art form. And of course, what is fundamental, most important thing to realize again is that it's the Chinese, the three sister arts of Chinese internal martial arts. You actually see that. And then, these are the three main arts. There were no other arts that would come close to them.
So, Santhip,
Actually,
did you study martial arts?
yeah, actually, I
I can
actually
tell.
studied it. Yeah, so
I'm like,
yeah.
I don't think he just pulled this out of his head.
Yeah, no, it was interesting. So martial arts. You remember, it was very interesting for me because I was studying martial arts first, and then I actually studied astrology. So it was like, when I started to study astrology, especially nakshatra, I could see these things play out very easily.
Wow. So what
Yeah,
course
so
did you study?
I studied it for 5 years or so. I
What
was
kind?
fortunate to study it for. I actually studied Xing Chuan here, Xing Chuan. But in Xing Chuan, the master was so good that he would actually teach some more Bagua. And the other guy, there was someone who also taught a little bit of Tai Chi. But the essence was the same. Even if you studied one martial art, you were actually practicing the other three. But the fundamental way you moved was different. But you can see that movement characterized by the nakshatras also. Like the Dhanishta nakshatra is there in Ashwini nakshatra.
And this is the
Yeah,
Chinese
Ashlesha.
system. There's
Exactly.
other, Japanese, Korean. I actually studied Hapkido.
Nice. Yeah.
Which is the Korean, that would be like the Ashwini, like the middle one, the explosive one.
Yeah.
That's the fighting one. Taekwondo is more like Tai Chi.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely. There's a lot more, but key thing is that I'm sure that we could connect all kinds of nakshatras to certain kind of martial arts form. That is the key thing. That's a big thing. Now, remember what I've done here. I've actually connected a Martian Karka theme with nakshatras. We have explored Mars through nakshatras. That's what you've done here. But here, what is most interesting is that the main three Chinese internal martial arts is actually characterizing the nakshatras where Mars is getting exalted, where Mars is having his Mul Trikon, and where Mars is getting debilitated. So those are three different fundamental points as far as Mars is concerned. So these three nakshatras are much more important in many ways. When you look at anything Mars, these three nakshatras become very, very important. Now they are expressing itself in the grandest art form through Tai Chi, Shingi, and Bhagwa. Definitely it's going to express itself in the ordinary chart as well, So yeah, that's what I have, Katya. Let's see. Yeah. So here again, I wanted to introduce this particular topic of analyzing the Martian nakshatras. Like I said, when I did study martial art for some years, but then when I started to study nakshatras, that's when I realized, what, these were perfect fit, and you could see that very clearly also. You could see that, and then so that's a very interesting kind of thing when you begin to look at that.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. I'm going to have to go back and watch this again, because it's so much detailed information. I really want to absorb some more. So I have a question pertaining to Mars right now. Transiting Mars, is it's going to be retrograde soon. And it'll actually go into Aries, and then it's going to go back into Pisces, and then go forward into Aries. So when Mars, I think it's probably just going to enter Ashwini. I haven't looked exactly, but when it enters Ashwini, it's going to be, I think, a lot of explosive energy. It's like we think it's bad now with the riots.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we're heading into a full-scale war right now, because they're sitting in the federal officers. So, and then of course, and we haven't even gotten to Aries yet, and then so, and then it's going to go back again, and it's going to hit that point again. So looking at the way you've discussed that, we can just get an idea and a flavor of, this energy. So as somebody who studied martial arts, and especially that type that's explosive, how do we deal with this energy coming at us? It's very triggered.
Yeah, it is very interesting. You can see Mars is in Ashwini Nakshatra, Ashwini Nakshatra, this is where astrology really helps. You can see that, Ashwini Nakshatra is actually linked with the Ashwin Kumars. Ashwin Kumars actually came out from the nostrils of Sanjana. So easiest thing is that you just need to control your breathing. That's the easiest thing. You just need to do the pranayama practice. You feel triggered, just do that diaphragmatic deep breathing kind of practice. It's as simple as that. You'll feel that a certain kind of breathing rhythm in your body cannot create anger in yourself. If you feel triggered, take deep breaths. It's as simple as that.
Now, pranayama is you breathe in on one side.
Yeah.
And then you release on the other side.
Yeah, that's the easiest pranayama. Yeah.
And you breathe out, and you can tell whichever nostril is more clogged.
Yeah.
Is the one where you have issues with, right?
Well, this is a full day seminar.
I know, but we got to give people a little bit of something to
what I can recommend, that's the simplest pranayama which you mentioned. Doing this for 5 minutes itself would create very tremendous healing thing. The one which you mentioned. The simplest pranayama is just breathing through one nostril, holding it for some time, breathing out through the other nostril, holding it for some time. That itself creates a lot of things.
Right, because the heart is, part of the Mars. I mean, the blood, the circulatory system, the heart, this is all Mars. And Mars, and I'm sorry, your heart is right with your lungs. So automatically, if you're activating your lungs, your heart is going to calm down.
Yeah, one story which my martial arts master shared was once, he said that one of his students got into an accident, but then he was panicking. He almost died. I mean, his car is total, he's fractured. He has to wait for someone to come up and pick him up. There's no other way. So only thing he could do was that he had to do this belly breathing to relax him. He had to expand his belly and, contract the belly. Which is each inhale you would expand the belly and each exhale you would contract the belly. That's probably the best thing I can share. If you feel triggered, of course, doing a regulator pranayama practice will enhance that. Doing this in conjunction with belly breathing is very, very powerful. That's what I can recommend. So it's called as a diaphragmatic breathing. That's the easiest, that's the most fullest breath you will have. You'll find that people are so congested in their heart right now. The more they are actually working on, healing their heart, opening that heart up, a lot of things begin to settle down. So suddenly you're actually having a mental space. You don't feel triggered anymore.
Yeah.
It just comes in time. Definitely.
Yeah, and getting overheated, like, I get really overheated, like physically overheated, where if I am in weather that's 100 and above, I'll go into anaphylactic shock because it's like an allergic reaction.
Yeah.
And so I was taught to do the Kriya Yoga breathing. That's and that cools your liver down, and that cools your body down. So that's, I think, another good way to incorporate some breathing.
It's called as I think it's called as Sitali Pranayam. Sitali Pranayam is somewhere where you actually turn your tongue in, like how you demonstrated, and you take the breath in through the tongue. So it actually cools that.
It does, and you can feel it on your tongue. It's like ice.
Yeah, you might be in 100-degree heat outside, but still you can actually do this breathing. You'll feel your body doing this for 5 minutes itself. You'll feel your body immediately cool down. In fact, yogis didn't care about the heat. They would go out. The breathing which you can do when you're out in the snow, there is breathing that you could do when you're out in the sun as well. So want you demonstrate.
And some people don't. I actually have to have the gene to be able to curl your tongue. So if you can't curl your tongue, just you want to have that cool air on your tongue, and that is going to cool down your liver. So
definitely. That's good. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So much to think about, Santhip.
Yeah, that's good. Great.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
So we'll go ahead and end this time. And for the next session, we will be doing Jupiter, Guru.
Right. That should be interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting, we've got this huge asteroid belt, right, between Mars and Jupiter. And they say there was once a planet there that, that blew up at some time. So I love studying astronomy alongside astrology. I think it's so important for people, to connect with the physics and the motion, which is the Shakti of the grahas and how they're actually moving around. So next time will be Jupiter, and then after that will be Saturn, and then we'll do Rahu and Ketu.
Yeah,
We've
definitely.
got
Yeah.
4 more. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Santhip.
Sure. Thank you.
Till
Thank you,
next
Katya.
time.
Yeah, sure.